Hello, everybody. Welcome, and thank you for being here after lunch on Friday. The title of this talk, Threat Intelligence, what is it and how do I do it? Do you know anything about this? Does this ring a bell? I suppose this interests you. Who am I? I'm a fan of security, like you. I like to innovate. I like to be an entrepreneur. And today I'm working in a Big Four. It's a consulting company to bringing innovative solutions for threats. I worked in cyber intelligence. In CyberCamp 2015, we opened a startup, and we were the winners. And so we just love to generate new ideas. And I'm a fan also about my wife and my daughter. So if you have kids, you know that this is a real passion, and you can share passions, and you have to share your time. Do you know what TLP, traffic light protocol? It's a simple system, very intuitive, how we share information. What really interests us is what we can share with whom. We have documents in the intelligence area that will be tagged as super confidential, TLP red, if we can share those within our organization, and the P amber for the community, and the TLP green, and for the public at large, TLP white. This is done in such a way that if you're dealing with an incident, you don't want to expose confidential information outside your team. So you have the definitions and where this comes from. This is applied, and this is protocol that is indicated in most of slides. Well, you will see those acronyms in strategic points. So this presentation would be tagged as what? It's unlimited dissemination for all publics. So it's TLP white. This is being implemented by the CR in the United States. For this presentation, it will be tagged as TLP white. Take this into account for the introduction. If you go to security congresses and conferences, or you will see it in a very typical way, and people don't want for you to take photos, and this information shouldn't be published in the internet, so depending on your color. And if you're interested, this is a Telegram group, .me/GSEG. You know that these people are very busy, or news channels and the CyberCamp 2017. Do you have any doubts, comments, questions? All this is welcome. As for the structure of my talk, we'll see definitions, what we're talking about, intelligence, types of threats. When we speak about threats and intelligence, what is a threat? The agents. It's not about actors and films. The bards are called actors, you can imagine. These people are carrying guns. The maturity model within the organization, how we are ready or not to defend ourselves. And the next part, it's a collection, use, and sharing of information. What are our sources? In what formats? Because you have a lot of information, but you don't really know how to move it from one place to another. And what are the platforms that help us for that? For information sharings. I'll give you this presentation so you can research on your side, and I'll give you the names of my colleagues so that you can ask them questions. And then acknowledgements and thanks. Many people have helped make this talk, so I'd like to thank them, and I hope you will learn a lot during this hour. And I'll give you the references so that you can know more about this.
Vamos a pasar al tema de las definiciones.
Let's talk about definitions.
¿Para qué necesitamos esto?
Why do we need this?
Tecnología cada vez
Technology
es más popular.
is more and more popular,
Atacantes, pues, en vez de robar bancos,
and instead of
siguen robando
stealing banks,
robarlos,
or instead of doing this with guns and hammers, it's easier from a bar or from home.
técnicas malware.
You can have malware techniques, and they can make profit. And it's not about robbing banks. It's not just an economic or financial purpose.
Pero sí, la tecnología
The technology allows for very good things, and these people are taking advantage. Threats continue to adapt.
paramos una brecha de seguridad.
We stop a security breach, and then just afterwards there's a new one. So you can patch these every week, and this is detected very easily, and the traditional defense are less effective. People put a firewall and they think the organization is protected. When there's a phishing email through the secretary and it's inside, so sometimes this is very inefficient, not just in education, but in technology, in training. People have to be aware. Type of intelligence. Suppose that you know the OSINTs, open source intelligence, everything that you can get from open sources, Fuming. Do you know? Finint, it's human intelligence. It's like spies movies. People with microphones are listening and talking. SIGINT for signals. Economic intelligence, Finint. There are companies which totalize bills by Samsung and Apple to invest in the stock exchange, and they know that according to the sales of the last quarter, they know how to make money. These are anonymous data, but they have a competitive edge because they know who earns more money. Geospatial intelligence, GeoInt and CITINT. What is intelligence? There's a collection of data, and we correlate data. There's always data all over the place. The only thing to know is how to process them and to explore them. Once we have compiled data, when we process data and we have information, we don't have intelligence from data, we just have information. When there's an analysis of that information, then we can obtain what we could be called intelligence. That's what you see on the right. Information is material that hasn't been assessed. You can have a lot of databases, but if you can't really see the meaning behind that, you don't have intelligence. In my talk, I'll speak about threat intelligence. It's the knowledge of threats, including capacities, infrastructure, motivation, goals, and what's behind the attacker. You know that we have hacktivists. Sometimes they just want to have fun, or because they want to vindicate causes, but then we have armies of hackers behind a state, and they want to get information for a financial goal. You know, the NSA tools, or tools used by the Chinese army. How can we protect ourselves? We have sources of information, internal and external. The more information we have, and the more accurate this information is, more intelligence we'll be able to get. You can obtain this from honeypots, crawlers. Any type of source is valid to obtain information, to process it, and to obtain intelligence. To do so, there is an intelligence cycle that allows you to get information. There's a comparison between CIA and CNA. In the CIA, you have 5 states: planning, direction. The director says, we are going to obtain this type of information or intelligence, And the resources people start collecting intelligence. They have people on site in Signal, infiltrated people, and resources are quite wide. We imagine all that they have in the CIA. We are aware there are many sources of information, and they're more accessible for governments. After the processing information, in fact, different teams or separate teams should do that at the same time in order to do cross information analysis and processing to get out the necessary knowledge out of that, and then producing intelligence and dissemination. Once the cycle is finished, this is delivered to, for instance, chiefs of state, of management people, if it's a company. As for the intelligence cycle applied to TIT, this is very similar. The CNI in Spain uses military models. All these cycles come from the military arena, and we apply this for cyber war, or at least to detect threats. Then we obtain data feeds, information that gets to us from honeypots or campaigns of people who are reporting malicious information. This information is external. It's threat intelligence, more valuable or less valuable information, depending if it's commercial or if we generate this internally. And if we have vulnerabilities, breaches, it's interesting to see those. To check that information in order to analyze it. Once we analyze the data, what do we obtain? Valuable information, TTPs. What are TTPs? We'll speak about TTPs. It's technical and procedures used by the attackers, how they are attacking the neighbor. Once we know that, maybe I can protect myself from that same attack and procedure. We can produce threat models. I want to know how do they do it. The attack tree, one of the resources that you will find at the end, there's a presentation by David Barroso, where you will see the trees. He prepares trees, and it's very attractive to know the threat so that the attackers follow the route. Once we get this information, we refine requirements, we share or we deliver this information with tic-tac-see format. I don't know if you know them. These formats are quite unified for information sharing and exchange. And then there is case studies development. Once there is an incident, we can follow up the case and then to close it and lessons learned. And in the next iteration, we will have more information and more knowledge, so it's good. What are the beneficiaries of this intelligence? Well, we have strategic, tactical, operational, and technical intelligence. The technical intelligence is the most popular one, so use your computer for that, but the CEO of the company or the board are more interested in knowing what are the external threats against other companies or to the company itself. As this information, or from this information, you can generate intelligence. You need to adapt it to the stakeholder and to the people you are going to deliver it. So you can give reports on purchases, on financial decisions, a company selling or buying. This can have an impact on the company, or especially for the shareholders. Observing in the internet or in other sources, you can deduct this type or deduce this type of information. Tactic information, tactics, techniques, and procedures. This information is about how the actors want to attack us, basically. Or it's about knowing their sophistication level, how they do it. And this information is for architects. This is operational information now. The security people and defense people use this type of information. And the technical part is for the SOC teams, its technical teams and incident response. Imagine that there's an attack and there is a department manager saying, we are being attacked. Let's see how they do it. And then we follow the procedure they follow to attack. To report it, you define the attack, you see the procedures that are being used, and once you've located them, you know already how you're being attacked, and you know how to remediate it. This information is given to the operational team, everything stops, and it's quite simple method. How to lift up the information and give it to the CEO of the company. We've been attacked, we know how to stop it. And once we've stopped it, you can draft a report of what's happened, what about the incidents, the financial repercussions, but thanks to our team and to our work, we've stopped the threat.
What sort of information do we have? Indicators, TTP, security alerts, automatic information, and intelligence reports. I don't know if you know, but intelligence reports have to be adapted to the interlocutor, but also technicians read them so that they can deduce what's happening and how to protect. Indicators and OCs are usually IP addresses or atomic data that you can use to pinpoint a hacking campaign. If they're out of context, they may not have much value, but if you raise them and you see how RAM software, what sort of indicators there are, and with the hash you can get more information and how to process it. What's interesting about that? Well, that the information that we have be appropriate and that you can use it. I'm not going to talk much about this. I'll let you read it. But as you know, everything that a company does, what you want it is for it to be as quick as possible, so you can defend it as much as possible. What kind of threats are there? Here you can see threat landscape. They're the main kinds of threats. You've got security breaches, service denial, exploits, insiders, that is people inside the organization that can sometimes do more harm, phishing, which is one of the most simple threats that attackers have, but that are usually very successful. If you go to the ETL page, you can get more information, and you can see of each threat its description and its type. There's also a mind map for threats. It's quite a big one. You probably can't read it from the back of the room, but if you look in more detail, you see there's malware. That's probably what you've most heard about. In fact, the next talk's about malware, adware, information manipulation attacks, and other kinds of attacks. And they're not just computer attacks. There's also attacks if somebody uses a device or it's robbed. If somebody can recoup that information, that suddenly becomes a threat. There are also legal issues, man-in-the-middle issues, and a whole list of threats that probably you're not even considering when you're trying to think about how to protect an organization, and they are important. Another issue that needs to be considered, because sometimes people confuse threat with risk, is to show where the risk is and where the threats lie. As you can see, risk is equal to threats multiplied by the vulnerabilities and the impact they can have. So it's not just so much that you are vulnerable to a threat, but that the attacker manages to use it, and that it does create a risk. So all the factors that we've seen do give you this risk equation. And that's important because if you carry out a global survey that reflects the main concerns of the last 12 months of the largest companies in the world, you can see that malware risks is one that the major companies are most concerned with today. Or phishing attacks. These are the most harmful. And in the last 12 months, what CSOs have done, and other security managers, what they've done, they've considered those are the most dangerous. As for vulnerabilities, people who are careless, who don't pay attention. I mean, the threats aren't necessarily in the technology, but actually sometimes it's the employees or people that try to interrelate with technology. You've probably seen a GIF of technology versus sysadmin, and sometimes it's the sysadmin that can get things wrong. It might not just be the secretary that opens the phishing email. It might be any kind of employee. Let's now look at actors. Here, we're talking about the bad guys. What sort of motivation, what sort of bad guys are out there? We've got opportunistic attacks, hobbyists, people that just go home and that have got some spare time and manage to get into a database, and because they do it in their free time. But they are a threat for any kind of organization. Sometimes you don't realize that you're not safe and somebody can create a lot of damage. But there are lower risks. But if you go up the scale, there are activists, hacktivists, people who, for political reasons, come together to carry out coordinated attacks on security installations. I'm sure you've probably heard of cases in which people come together as a group to achieve an aim. And the aim isn't always is money. Organized crime. These are searching for profit. They want money, either through fraud, extortion. Sometimes they use personalized malware, Trojans, ransomware. But that's usually through different organized gangs in which each group takes charge of each part and can create a lot of harm. And then there are advanced persistent threats, which are elite groups who rob intellectual property and who can be dormant or go undetected for 2 years, and who are spying, making money. They've got their own malware, their own techniques, and actually it's kind of complicated to get hold of them. There are not very many of them, but they're usually very good at what they do. And state actors, for example, governments like the Chinese government. I wasn't trying to point the finger at anybody, but we know that China has a hacker army. And these attack countries, try to influence in elections. These are people with lots of resources, and they've got a state funding these kind of things, diplomatic problems. They are very, very highly advanced, and it's kind of complicated to defeat them because they can manipulate them. How do they go about this normally? The kill chain is how the attack happens. There's a recognition phase. There's techniques to recognize the victim. And you can see what infrastructures they have exposed, possible vulnerabilities, what attack lines. Then you can manufacture malware made to measure. This is the initial stage, which you know that you're going to follow, and you concentrate on a directed attack. Then the delivery. Sometimes you know phishing or spear phishing. You can get email data on data that you've got. You've won the lottery at Christmas, and you send the email. But phishing and spear phishing campaigns are smaller and far more directed. Once the employee or the person who's being attacked opens their email, they'll start running. Once the malware or the attach is opened, and there are several techniques, the program's installed, and a backdoor is left open to carry on accessing in the future. What sort of
robar información, manipular información.
options are out there? There's information theft, information manipulation. It's important to know what the aim is, the target is, and then carry it out. There are 1,000 different ways of hiding what you're doing and to glean the data that are interesting for the attacker at that time. How do we detect these kind of attacks? We can detect through the malware sample. We can remove the hash, and with that we can see whether other endpoints have been affected by this sample or by the same attack. IP addresses. If we detect that an attack's been launched from an IP address, we can block it in our firewall. That's, however, if they've already got into several pieces of equipment, they've just got to change their IP address, domain names. Because if we can discover the domain names that they use for their control to download more information, we can block them, but attackers can find others. And it's quite easy to register a domain, net artifacts, and TTPs. When we finally hit the nail on the head, the procedural techniques are the most complicated things to detect for an analyst, but they're what most harms the attacker. Once you've discovered how the attack is being carried out, it's actually fairly easy to detect the next iteration. So the attacker will create a domain, and IP address is fairly easy. But actually changing their techniques completely from top to bottom is far more difficult. That takes more time. There's something else, which comes from Countercraft, which is counterintelligence, counter-espionage. That's hack intelligence or hack systems, where the attacker may feel that they've attacked the target and can extract information from it. That's counterintelligence. So you adapt to what he's doing and you allow them to do what they're doing. Examples of TTPs. Military server, which has been infected. Communication channels, normally in universities they add to whitelists, and nobody suspects that in a university because they may have a piece of equipment, a computer that's affected, and they don't know that, or there's also back doors as well. These are the sort of TTPs that are used. If we detect all the procedures that the attackers have, then of course we can deal with them. This is a threat report. Here you can see the time frame, how it works. The identifiers, malware's name, campaigns that are known. At the time of the report, that was not known. TTPs, and the first thing they write is attackers of spear phishing. And another one comes in additional information or indicators with hashes, and their different letters are up on the screen, and you can follow the malware and see what it says about that. There are other platforms that also I'll show you to obtain more information. One of these reports can tell you whether you could be affected or not, or whether you need to look at it in more detail, and the references as well. This is a more technical report, and what we're seeing here are strategic kind of reports, where you get agent trends, how they're moving. It's a quarterly or 4-monthly report. You don't get so much technical information and so many technical details, but you do see the kind of groups that are being attacked. Here you can see one of the groups, APT29, I think it's called, has different names. Interesting. the names, and there are several references to the same groups with different names. If you want to have a look at this, there are pages such as apttracking.com, where you can see the different names of these groups, what they're called, links to get more information about them, and campaigns that you know. You won't get all the information from public sources, but if there are groups of people that are trying to bring all this information together in one site. Another page in Google, if you search for APT29, here you can find groups, operations, malware, and investigate what these kind of people are like, because their TTPs coincide or because the hash that's popped up is the same as one from another campaign. Let's now move on to the maturity models. What you do is collect information when the organization is trying to implement a strategic intelligence plan. There you can see the different platforms where you can gain data. What many people do is try to get information. What's interesting is to analyze data, gradually make the program more mature, get information about business decisions, and on that basis you can see whether they're attacking you or a neighbor, what you can do, what strategic decisions are necessary to prevent certain kinds of attacks, refine processes, and take active defense. This is when there's a very mature organization that has its own team for defense and can generate intelligence internally. Not all organizations have that possibility because it's expensive, and sometimes it's not even accessible because you can spend years looking into a campaign and you don't always see all the others that may be affecting you. Here you've got a maturity model, which is more detailed on the left. In that column, you can see the basic state, and on the right, what you access. And at the bottom, you can see the complete reference. You can see whether you're working in a company, what state it's in, where you can improve. Then next, and this is divided into the technical side of things, strategic and operational. And the technical side of things, it's written in English, and that's very important for this sector of cybersecurity and threat intelligence. It's very important that it's written in English. The majority of the documents that we're talking about are written in English here. We can review indicators. And where you see indicator analysis, the first box says that if we've got them in Excel and they're stored manually, we need to look at the next area, see where the indicators are shared, extracted, and directly go to a system which can either share them or extract them. Or the indicator application. If we've detected in a sample that might be malicious, we can go from computer to computer to see what's happened, or automate it with a third-party software to avoid the manual dealing with things. These are things that you learn over time, and once you've suffered from different attacks, experience shows you that you need to mature. As for organizations, this was taken from a security survey where you can see that there are organizations that don't have a program for a program of threat intelligence, or companies that share information, have got a threat intelligence program, are able to look at external feeds. 12% of companies have intelligence teams, and only 6% have an advanced function which have dedicated intelligence and create intelligence. And this is to make it reliable. These are, of course, studies in which several companies participate, and you can see That's either not much done, or what has been done isn't very advanced. Collection, using, and sharing information. In this part, we're going to look at sources, formats, and platforms. As for sources, you know, in Surface Web, you can find indexed and OSINT and open access and free feeds and some kind of tools that you can start with. In the deep web, these aren't indexed by search engines. Sometimes it's information that isn't accessible to everybody. And as for the deeper part, sometimes the information is only accessible if you're invited in certain closed communities where content can last for a few minutes or a few hours. It's not always possible to access it. What about sources? Here we've got an anti-phishing source. Here you can see the type of format. You can access their website and obtain the information. What are you interested in? We're not seeing it manually, but able to access it through API. I.e., each platform, each source may have a different format, but what we're interested in the future is to standardize or use a common format in which our platforms or intelligent solutions are able to communicate, find the information, or request it. Sometimes it's not always easy to find that information. And it's interesting to notify that and score to indicate whether the information is correct or not. And you can see whether it's an automatic bot that's taken the case. Obviously, you get a lower score there, so as not to confuse. And see the trust in that information. There are other open. Is a malware sample. You've got other indicators to detect them or to apply them in your system. There are commercial sources as well, such as this one, where you get information about IPs, malicious IPs, bots that do logins, hacktivist campaigns, and others as well. What are we interested in here? How it can be integrated in Cia and how this information can be used to correlate with internal indicators to see whether there are any IPs connected to a malicious attack. And with these type of commercial feeds, we can get it. If we don't use blank, but another kind of platform, there's another format for information where we can adapt to our needs or consult them directly and integrate it with the API that's in a solution. But we don't have to reinvent the wheel. There are lots of platforms such as Yeti, which we'll look at in a moment, that will give you sources integration. These are the open sources. I tried to make a list of them so that you could tinker with them. There are many commercial tools that I'm not mentioning, but if you're interested, we can mention them at the end. Simon.io. Here you can see different repositories with information sources, which is very useful and interesting, where there's a high level of trust in that information. So there are many investigators putting information in there, and what's good is you can also share it. You've got the URL if you're interested in them. Formats. Here you can see there are different formats. CIF, Open IOCs, FIBOX, TICs, TACs. Let's have make a summary of what TICs and TACs are. Depending upon what platform you're using, you can use one or the other, whichever you find most convenient. The best thing is to get to know them and try to exchange information between several of them, because you've probably got different kinds of information. You're probably interested in this threat intelligence information. You probably want it to be able to share it easily. With sticks, information is shared by machines consistently and legibly. It's important that we be able to read it, but that also that machines be able to read it and that it be reliable. There's more information about that in the GitHub page. What does it look like? Well, there's a part that's TTPs, which, as I said before, which are tactics, techniques, and procedures. There's detractors, response to the attack. All this information can be represented on icons, group identities, or indicator identities, the IOCs, which is indicators, hashes, and IPs, intrusion sets, which are malware kits or whatever is being made to attack. It's like the set of intrusions that's used to attack the corporation. Malware, data, which is perhaps the most atomic kind of data, IP address, reports, which we looked at briefly, what each report means, what sort of information is out there. The real bad guys, and you know they are depicted with a guy with a hat and glasses. Legitimate software, sometimes to achieve its objective, malicious attackers use tools, legitimate commercial tools, for their campaigns. And vulnerabilities, which are software mistakes, many of you will have found lots of them. Some are zero-day type. If they're not reported to the company that owns the software, sometimes they're used in the shade to attack certain companies and obtain a profit. How is this represented? Well, we want to relate all this information and see that something's been observed. Here you can see what sort of activity we're seeing. You can see there's a diagram which you can monitor what threats we're seeing, what indicators are there, what tactics are being used, what vulnerabilities, what exploits are being used to attack us, what actors are behind that, and how we can solve it. Because on many occasions, having seen everybody else's list, we're interested in how to solve the problem, not just to detect it, but also how to solve it. Information exchange platforms. This is API, which aligns the exchange models. Taxi is being designed especially to interact with STICs. So you've got collections, which are repositories of objects. Requests are made in request-reply mode. The canals show you the producers sending data to one or several consumers. You can't rely on all of them, but you can draw your own conclusions. Let's now move on to the platform. Here you can see there's all sorts of information, both internal and external. As for internal, there's parts that are reliable, forensic investigation teams, the forensic side and machine analysis is related to threat intelligence, penetration teams, and that's together with external part of things such as different external thoughts crawlers, malware lists, and there are databases full of vulnerabilities. This is all combined, and you get the threat intelligence which you can take action on. Let's just briefly look at the threat intelligence platforms.
The application program that allows me to centralize those data and to reach conclusions. Many of those that allow you to take information out of malware. You can take samples, but you can be the first of the class, and maybe you're seeing a malware that nobody has seen. So this information may be very valuable. And then we have free use tools or commercial tools. Some of them have a trial period and limited functionality, but it's useful because you can just have an idea of how to use them. Let's see Intel MQ, incident handling platform. These tools are good for CERT to work with incident response teams. This allows you to collect a great number of data, and as you can see here, there's a part of import export of data. Here you can link it, see the data flow and how to work with this. I want to import data, but also to export them with MISP, Yara rules, etc. This is the exports part with APIs. This is the format that you can pick. Here we'll see the information that is contained. You'll see it in JSON format. And we'll see what are the fields, the information contained, and how this information is brought to the next entity. As the exit, you see the type of exit that all these data can give you. Where does information come from? Bots. So bots are collecting information, and this is updated regularly. Most of this data, this is public information. So you can subscribe to those and start seeing information. Later on, we'll see how to treat it, how to process it, and interact it. You can use Kibana so that this can be operational. This is Kibana, free software. You can install this for free. Kibana, Elastic, Logstat, Elastic Logstats, and I just can't remember the other one, and, well, Kibana. You can view all the data. The searches here for malware, malcode. You can search for the source of information, or IPs, or types of attacks. This is the type of information that we can obtain in this type of platforms. As you can see, it's quite free and open to what you want to do. Not everything is written. You can enlarge it with your own modules and take more advantage of this tool. As for MISP tools, this is used by CERT. INCIBE is using that too. This is used to share information for malware indicators. This is tagged. Well, you see the big letters, the BP wipe. What is the type of information I can share and with whom? Sometimes we share information between companies or between the national certs or between all bodies that are validated with. You can subscribe. You see that the European cert is working with this platform. Yeti is another tool that you can use. It's quite intuitive and quite recent. Here you can see the campaign follow-up, actors, malware. Everything is centralized on a single location. But if you go to look for information in many places, it's not very effective. It's better to have in a single location. It's good to have an IP, but to know if this IP is malicious or not, or if it belongs to a well-known actor. So it's more agile to analyze that in a single location. And if you can do the enriching of investigations with graphic format, much the better. Here, with this picture, we can see it easier. For humans, it's much easier to understand in a graphic way. Let's see the Simon.io platform. These platforms, you can search directly what you look for. In the search engine for threats, here, let's look for one of the samples.
que era malware.
malwares.
Ya tengo el hash puesto.
I've got the hash.
Aquí lo que vamos a hacer es buscar este caso que era
I'm
el primer documento que os he
searching
enseñado antes,
this
sacar algo de
case,
información
and out of this
adicional
document, I want to get more additional information
un PETIA, de lo que es ransomware. Pues aquí ya podéis
about
ver de forma
ransomware.
rápida con interfaz web.
Here with the web
Consola.
interface, where you
Tenéis
can
la
use
lista de
consoles, here the
referencias
list
de referencia.
of reference
La parte de
tools.
referencia, podéis ver un poco ese hash con
You
qué
can see the
otros casos
hash
está
that is
relacionado,
related to other hashes with which
si lo
virus.
buscamos en
If we
otras
do the search
comunidades tipo
in
Blue
other communities like
tenéis
Bluelive,
para buscar
here you can search indicators, you can share information.
la que voy a buscar es
I'm searching for total
Bueno, esto es de
virus.
Alien Vault,
This is Alien Vault.
TX, que metiendo el mismo hash
So
ya me da más
typing the same
información
hash, I can get more information.
y lo que vais a poder ver de forma bastante
And
rápida es otra de las
you see
comunidades
another community.
cómo funciona no Petya ransomware, Petya IOCs,
Petya ransomware, Petya
indicadores
ransomware, Petya IOCs, and then you can have compromise indicators. This is the virus total intelligence, the same hash and the information that I can obtain.
Entonces, aquí ya me da más información
Here
de lo que
I
es el
get
fichero
more
en sí,
information about the file itself,
ejecutable,
the
los
executable, the
antivirus
antivirus that
veis,
detects
teniendo
this.
los indicadores, los hashes,
So having the hashes in the indicators, you will find what antivirus can detect this. This is 2 years ago. You can see the details, content of the file, analysis, who detects it, who doesn't detect it, and comments of the files
las acciones que hace.
and actions.
Esto era lo que os comentaba al principio, bueno, perdonad que no os he saltado.
I'm sorry because I didn't show you this. This is the actors chart. This is APT groups, operations and malware search engines, actor tracker, and I think that's all. And that's what I showed you at the beginning. You've got the references in my presentation so that you can have a look and obtain information from specific samples. And if you think that a web is malicious, you can have a look at it. Commercial tools. You can make a test, do a test of the IBM tool, X-Force. It's a very good repository, X-Force, for threat intelligence. How do we share information about threats? We see it SOCs. You know, it's a Security Operational Center, that's SOC. There, information is shared with other SOCs, but some of them don't share any information. These are global surveys, and it's not easy to share information. It's not always accessible because personal data could be violated. In Spain, IPs are considered as personal data. I'd like to thank some people, Ivan, Gonzalo, these guys always help me in all projects. We are always together doing something. These colleagues in cybersecurity. As a recap, I hope that you've learned about formats, stick, taxi, threat intelligence, strategic and operational tactics, the tools that you could start using. Many of them are in web format if you're not very good in consoles. So others can be installed very easily in your computer. And if you prefer to program, you can interact with APIs to manage information. References. Many links here. Here you will find enough information to go ahead if you're interested. And at some points, explanations are very good, but you can also contribute. I don't know if you have doubts or questions. We left a channel, Telegram channel, and a Telegram group so that we can be updated on this section. You can ask through Telegram, or if you want to ask questions here, I will be glad to do so.
Vale, pues muchas gracias.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you for your attention.